So, individualism is a key concept in liberalism. In fact, it's a core concept that other concepts rely upon. And individualism is the idea that the individual is of supreme importance in terms of their rights, in terms of their needs, over a collective group. Society is basically just an aggregation of individuals. In fact, Locke would say that we join together in voluntary association with a social contract in order to join society because we're better off doing that. But the individual is paramount. This idea is very different to the idea of collectivism, which we see particularly in socialism, traditional conservatism, even in Islamic ideas, and also in Confucian ideas, where the individual is subsumed within a collective, be it the collective of the nation, be it the collective of the class, such as the working class, or even the family. So the individual comes first, and this basically stems from the Enlightenment, and it stems from the idea that the individual should come first, which is very different, of course, if you think of a feudal society, where the individual is very much part of a certain station within that society. So the good thing about this is it sort of arguably is the anti-slavery, anti-imperialism, anti-racist, anti-homophobic. So these aspects of liberalism put the individual first. So the idea is the individual is logically and morally prior to society. There can be no society without individuals. So Kant, an Enlightenment philosopher, argues that individuals are ends in themselves, not a means to an end. He emphasizes, of course, the dignity and the individual worth of every human being. So Locke, of course, emphasized human rights, universal human rights, where he argued that no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions, so that for Locke, the individual comes first, and so that they may form a social contract in order to join society to be better off. So a lot of these ideas of Enlightenment philosophers are part of what we call classical liberalism. So for classical liberals, they see very much the individual as maximising their self-interest, their self-reliance, of maximising their utility. For example, promoting their own happiness within the marketplace is how Adam Smith, an economic liberal, might see the individual. So this is often called egoistical individualism. And another term for it might be atomism, which is the idea of society made up simply of a collection of self-interested, self-sufficient individuals, a bit like atoms within a material. Okay, so many political thinkers dispute this and aren't so starkly individualist. And so if we look at the state as a consequence of this, you have a minimal state where individuals are not to be controlled for the state's interest, or maybe more importantly, for their own interest. You've maybe heard of the term the nanny state, which neoliberals tend to use when they talk about big government interfering in individuals' lives, like you shouldn't eat too much fat, you shouldn't eat too much sugar, you shouldn't drink too much, you shouldn't smoke. Well, surely that's for a classical liberal, that is up to the individual themselves if they want to self-harm in that way, because only the individual can judge what maximises their own utility. Now, moving on from this, perhaps in the 20th century, we have a more modern version of individualism, which is called developmental individualism, and this emphasises really the ability of individuals to be able to pursue personal development, to enable human flourishing, perhaps in an Aristotelian sense. So the idea is that people can reach their personal best within a free society. Okay, thank you for watching.